Uh, a little bit different of a podcast episode. Today, I'm going to be talking about some of the latest developments in my life, such as leaving my job. Around 6 months ago, I joined a new team to try something new. So it wasn't something I've ever done before. It was completely different. I knew nothing. I basically just heard about a team from a coworker and I talked to him about it. And then in between the time of talking to him and walking back to my desk, I decided I'm going to make this switch. So that was a rush decision to say the least. But in my mind, I was thinking, oh, this is already an open role. If I don't take it, someone else will at some point. And I was already looking for a change because I was kind of bored with what I was doing. So so I kind of just jumped the gun a little bit on that. Um, but over time on this new team, I realized I didn't enjoy the work that much. And I also wasn't enjoying the environment. It was just very different than what I was used to. And I felt very alone in a way. You know, there were aspects of the whole thing that just made me feel like I had to do it all by myself, even though that wasn't necessarily reality. I never really felt like I was burning out. Um, I think the whole situation was just stressful for me. And because I was in all new territory, it was just really hard to get my footing and feel that, okay, I have a good understanding and now I can actually do my job. If I had to make an analogy, it was like drowning in every situation and not being able to swim to keep up with others, and it's a very, it feels pretty bad to be in that situation. That's what you kind of get when you jump into something new and you don't know anything and there's a bar to meet is, you can end up feeling like you're drowning if you're not able to, you know, meet the standards that need to be met. This team change was just the last thing I wanted to explore. So I explored it, and when it got to be too much, and when things started happening, I just had accepted that, okay, this is life telling me that I need to go and do something else for a bit. I've never been one to like have the Sunday dread. Like I never dreaded going to work on Sunday or on Monday. I never dreaded like work at all. It was a good sign that, I don't want to live this way. I don't want to dread every single week where I had to go back to work. I didn't want to hate my job. I always saved a portion of money while I worked in tech. And obviously, like, I worked at a rather large company and I did make like six figures, but I never spent my money to a point where I didn't have any left over. I crunched the numbers a couple months uh, beforehand, and I was comfortable with where I was at. I had determined that I could go over a year without earning a penny and still be okay. I wouldn't want to do that because, that's a lot of money. But at least I knew I could, right? I knew how much runway I had. I knew how much time I would want to give myself before I had to seriously reconsider what I was doing. And it also helps that, I'm not alone. My husband worked. So it was like, it never really crossed my mind that we would ever go a long time without any income. less income, yes, but 0 is probably not gonna happen. So, because I knew that, we had ways to bring in money and we had savings that we could rely on for a good bit, I didn't really line up a job. I didn't line up a full-time job. I lined up a freelance project. What I knew for sure was that I wanted a break from working for a company. I think that my experience towards the end of my last job, it just really made me crave a little bit more freedom. And, with the tech industry the way it is right now, I just needed to get away from that for a little bit. During my first day without a job, I had a huge sense of relief. I have just felt so relieved to be out of a stressful situation, not have that dread anymore, so it was just so liberating. But also, it let me reflect on the situation I was in, and it allowed me to see things a little bit more objectively. But ultimately, my philosophy is that there's no turning back in life. Even if like they reached out tomorrow and was like, hey, we have a different role. Do you want to come back? I would likely turn it down. So yeah, if I was to get another job, it wouldn't be at my old company. As far as like my family's reaction to this, I've only really talked about it with my husband mostly. I was also honest about it with my kids, but by the time I left my job, we were already on the same page. We went through, what it would look like. And, I think having that level of communication just, just really helps in this sort of transition. I think the biggest lesson I learned was to look out for myself. I put myself through months and months of a lot of stress, lots of crying during the evenings to when I was trying to figure something out, and just a lot of stress. I always ask myself now if it was worth it, um, because I rarely ever take mental health into consideration. Well, I rarely ever take my mental health into consideration. Usually I am, I'll get through it, I'll figure it out, I'll push through it, and I'm just very stubborn in that sense. Like, I don't give up too easily. What this has taught me was like, when you're stressed out, maybe you should check in with yourself and ask yourself, like, is this going to work out? And is it even worth it? Like, is all the stress you're putting yourself under worth it? Because if it's not worth it, then you should direct your stress towards finding a way out, not pushing through, right? If there was anything I could do differently about the way things occurred, I probably would try harder to build relationships with people. The environment wasn't very conducive to that, but I always wonder like maybe if I just talk to them more, maybe if I asked them to lunch more, they would the relationship would naturally be there. But, it was just hard. So for the months that I was on my last team, I felt pretty isolated. I worked on things that not too many other people have worked on, and I was pretty alienated from my teammates. I think the last thing that I think about is like I probably would have done more research on the work that this team did. and the environment of this team before jumping teams. I think maybe I should have asked a little bit more questions about the environment and gotten a much fuller picture than what I had. But I think, as I said at that time, I think I was already trying to look for a change, that I kind of just took any change and thought it was a good idea, even if now it doesn't really make sense. I think it changed the way I think of success. I'm pretty stubborn, and for most situations, I will push my way through without considering like any sort of like mental health. But now I kind of see it differently in the sense that it's not always worth pushing through, because if you're under so much stress and you're emotionally in a bad place, you might reach success and not even know it. Like, you might feel so bad that even success feels bad. And you might think, why am I never successful? As far as what's next, right now, I'm focusing on freelancing. Um, that's just what I'm doing for now while I try to figure things out. But I do want to have time to do my own projects and, you know, explore my own ideas, right? In the beginning, when I knew I would be leaving, I had started job hunting for a new job, but then a couple weeks into that, I stopped because it occurred to me like I've always wanted this chance. So I changed from like the mindset of like, oh, I'll get a new job, to, oh, I'm gonna give myself a chance. I'm gonna bet on myself this time. And if things don't work out, I'll get another job. I'm not anti-job. I'm just pro giving myself a chance and pro betting on myself for a little bit. So I don't have everything figured out. Like, I left a very structured way of working, and now I kind of have to create my own structure. I kind of just defaulted to what school used to be like. I set up time blocks for myself. I try to just assign things to time blocks and group them in a way that makes sense. And when that time block is up, I move on. I stop what I'm doing, I close it down, and I move on. I had some wonderful times at my last company, and there were some very enjoyable, yet still very productive moments. And I would say I'm at that point right now. Like, I don't know if I'm as productive, but I am the same level of happiness of like feeling like I can be creative and I can have fun and, you know, feel pretty relaxed at the same time. I do miss some aspects of my old company. I really love the people there. I love the environment for the most part. And I love the culture. But, as with all companies, those things will change over time. I joined my company when it was a lot smaller, still like medium size, but still, not the size it is right now. And I saw it through for 11 years, and I don't regret that. I think a lot of people hop from job to job every year or every few years. And I got to see a company grow. I got to see it get acquired, and I got to see how that acquisition affected the culture of the company for better or for worse. I'm really excited to like explore my own ideas and even just freelancing. I am excited for the freedom that this allows me. Um, it's a whole new mindset though. Like, before working in tech company, you know, there were other people that told me what was important, what did the business need, and what was the most important thing we had to get to our customers. Um, but now, I have to think of all that, right? It's like I have to figure it out. I don't know if this doing my own thing is going to be permanent, but at least I have time to experience it with like very minimal worries. I think to be successful, you have to try new things. And, sometimes it does involve jumping in feet first or head first, hopefully, feet first. uh, and sometimes it's a mistake. But if you go through your career of being scared to try new things, it's just going to like limit your potential in the long run. But my main goal right now is just to give myself time and space to try my own ideas, figure out my own things, try different things. I don't know what all that's going to look like in the future. Am I going to freelance? Am I going to do a startup? Am I going to build products? Am I going to do a YouTube channel? Am I going to stream on Twitch? Like all of these things I have considered to some extent. All right, well, that's it. See you later. Bye.